Angela's silence has always been her confession. When my husband, Michael Foster, said those words in front of our children, our friends, and everyone gathered for our 37th wedding anniversary, every eye in the room turned toward me. They expected me to defend myself. Instead, I lowered my gaze just as I had done for decades. Michael smiled, certain my silence had won him the room once again. What no one knew was that I had never stayed quiet because I was guilty. I had stayed quiet to protect the man who was destroying me. And that night, for the first time in 37 years, I decided my silence was over. If you've ever kept quiet just to keep the peace, I think you'll understand this story. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Tell me in the comments, do you believe silence always means guilt? Or can it sometimes be an act of love? If this story speaks to your heart, please like this video and subscribe. Your support truly means more than you know. People often say that the strongest marriages are the quiet ones. For years, everyone believed mine was one of them. My name is Angela Foster. I was 62 years old when my life finally changed. But the story really began nearly 4 decades earlier. Michael Foster and I had been married for 37 years. We lived in a comfortable neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, in the same brick house where we had raised our 2 children, Rebecca and Ethan. From the outside, our life looked almost perfect. Michael had retired after a long career as a financial advisor. He was the kind of man who never forgot a birthday, always volunteered at church, and greeted every neighbor by name. People admired him because he always seemed calm, patient, and dependable. I had worked as a librarian for almost 30 years before retiring. I loved books because they were honest. Every page stayed exactly where it belonged. Real life wasn't nearly as simple. Whenever people saw us together, they smiled. You two are relationship goals. I hope my marriage lasts as long as yours. Michael is such a gentleman. I always smiled politely. Sometimes I even believed those compliments myself. But appearances have a strange way of hiding the truth. Looking back, I don't think Michael changed overnight. Neither did I. It happened slowly, so slowly that I hardly noticed. In the early years of our marriage, I wasn't quiet at all. I laughed loudly. I shared my opinions. I loved telling stories at family dinners. Michael even used to tease me about talking too much. I married the most talkative woman in Ohio, he would joke. Everyone laughed. So did I. Then, little things began to change. If someone asked me a question, Michael answered before I could. Angela means, what she wants to say is, she gets nervous speaking in front of people. At first I thought he was only trying to help. He smiled while speaking for me. He squeezed my hand afterward. He made it seem loving. Eventually, people stopped asking me directly. They looked at Michael instead. He always had an answer ready. One Thanksgiving, my sister asked whether I planned to travel after retirement. Before I could open my mouth, Michael smiled. We've decided to stay close to home. I remember blinking in surprise. We had never discussed that. Actually, I had always dreamed of visiting Maine in the fall. But everyone nodded as if the conversation was finished. I let it go. It seemed too small to argue about. Those small moments became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Michael spoke. Everyone listened. I stayed quiet. The strange thing was that Michael never shouted. He rarely raised his voice. He didn't need to. He had discovered something much more effective. He controlled every conversation before it even began. If I interrupted him, he'd chuckle. Oh, Angela remembers things differently. Everyone laughed. If I corrected him, he'd place a gentle hand on my shoulder. Honey, you're mixing up the dates again. People smiled sympathetically. If I insisted, he'd sigh as though he were exhausted. I don't want us arguing in front of everyone. Suddenly, I looked unreasonable. No matter what happened, Michael always appeared calm. I always looked emotional. It was a game I didn't even realize I was playing. And I kept losing. After enough years, something inside me changed. I stopped trying. Not because I agreed with him, because arguing never accomplished anything. Every disagreement followed the same routine. We'd get home. Michael would close the front door. His smile disappeared. "You embarrassed me." I was only trying to explain. You always make things harder than they need to be. The arguments sometimes lasted hours, sometimes 2 or 3 days. Then he'd become warm again. He'd bring me coffee, buy flowers, act as though nothing had happened. I began believing silence was cheaper than conflict. Peace became my goal. Not happiness, just peace. People often ask why women stay quiet. It's difficult to explain unless you've lived it. Silence doesn't arrive all at once. It grows, one conversation at a time, one apology at a time, one compromise at a time, until one day you realize you've forgotten what your own voice sounds like. Rebecca never noticed. She adored her father. To her, Michael was the patient parent, the wise one, the dependable one. Whenever she needed advice, she called him first. I didn't blame her. That was exactly the image Michael had built. Ethan was different. He loved both of us equally. He hated arguments. Whenever tension filled the room, he'd find an excuse to leave. "I've got work tomorrow. I should get going. I'll call you both later." He escaped because he didn't know how to fix what he couldn't understand. Neither of my children ever saw what happened after guests went home. No one did, because Michael never allowed anyone to. At church, he complimented me constantly. "My wife keeps me organized." I couldn't do life without Angela. Everyone admired his devotion. Sometimes I wondered if he believed those words himself. Maybe he did. People are remarkably good at believing their own stories, especially when everyone around them applauds. The hardest part wasn't that strangers believed Michael. It was that I slowly began believing him too. Maybe I really was too sensitive. Maybe I misunderstood conversations. Maybe it wasn't worth correcting every little thing. Those thoughts became habits. Habits became silence. Silence became my identity. Then something happened that changed the meaning of every quiet moment in our marriage. One evening, after another dinner where Michael had answered every question directed at me, I stood alone in our kitchen, washing dishes. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked tired, older than 62, smaller somehow. I asked myself a question I hadn't dared ask in years. When was the last time someone heard my side of the story? I couldn't remember. That frightened me more than anything, because if I couldn't remember, how could anyone else? I dried my hands, turned off the kitchen light, and followed Michael upstairs. He smiled at me before going to bed. He kissed my forehead. "Good night, sweetheart." I smiled back, just like always. I had no idea that years earlier, one decision Michael made would become the beginning of the end for everything we had built. And it would be the first time he discovered just how useful my silence could be. 15 years before our anniversary dinner, Michael made a decision that changed everything. At the time, I didn't realize it would become the first brick in the wall he was building around me. It started with what he called an incredible opportunity. One Saturday morning, he walked into the kitchen carrying a folder. His eyes were bright. "I've found an investment that could double our retirement savings." I poured coffee into 2 mugs. "What kind of investment?" a commercial property development. My former client invited me in. I frowned. Have you looked into it carefully? He smiled confidently. I've spent weeks researching it. I trusted him. After all, he had spent his career helping people manage money. Who was I to question a financial advisor? Still, something bothered me. Maybe we should only invest part of our savings. Michael reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Angela, sometimes life rewards people who have courage. I didn't answer immediately. I never said yes. I never signed a single document. I simply said, I hope you're right. A month later, nearly all of our retirement savings had been invested. 6 months after that, the company collapsed. The project failed. The investors lost almost everything. I remember sitting in our living room staring at the ceiling. I couldn't breathe. Years of careful saving had disappeared. Michael paced back and forth. I never saw this coming. Neither had I. For several days, we barely spoke. Bills still had to be paid. Life continued, but something between us had shifted. A week later, Rebecca invited us to Sunday dinner. She had no idea what had happened. Neither did Ethan. As we drove there, I asked Michael a simple question. What are we going to tell them? He kept his eyes on the road. We'll tell them the truth. I nodded. I believed him. That was my mistake. Dinner was pleasant until Rebecca asked the question. So, Dad, how's that investment you were excited about? Michael sighed dramatically. It didn't work out. Rebecca looked concerned. Oh, no. Then Michael said something I never expected. Angela and I both believed it was worth the risk. I turned toward him. He continued speaking before I could. We discussed it for weeks. Rebecca looked at me. Mom, were you okay with investing everything? My heart pounded. I opened my mouth. No words came out. Not because I agreed, because I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Michael looked at me briefly. His expression was calm, patient, almost encouraging, as though daring me to interrupt him. Then he continued. We both thought it was the right decision. Rebecca nodded sympathetically. I guess these things happen. Ethan shrugged. Nobody can predict the market. Everyone moved on. The conversation changed. I barely touched my dinner. On the drive home, the silence inside the car felt heavier than ever. The moment we walked through the front door, I finally spoke. You lied. Michael calmly removed his jacket. No. You told them we made the decision together. You didn't correct me. I stared at him. I was shocked. He shrugged. But you stayed silent. I felt my hands shaking. That doesn't make it true. Michael looked directly at me. His voice was soft. So, what do they believe now? I didn't answer. He answered for me. They believe we agreed. Then he smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was worse. It was satisfied. You see, Angela? What? People trust the version they hear first. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You used my silence. I used what happened. No, you knew I couldn't respond that fast. He folded his arms. You always take too long to speak. I felt tears filling my eyes. I needed a moment. You took it. And everyone assumed I agreed. Michael nodded. Exactly. He said that word so casually. Exactly. As though he had solved a simple math problem. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the dinner in my mind. Could I have stopped him? Should I have interrupted him? Would anyone have believed me if I had? The next morning, I drove to a small office supply store. I bought a plain black notebook. Nothing fancy, just lined pages and a sturdy cover. When I got home, I wrote one sentence. Today I realized memory fades, but paper doesn't. That notebook became my quiet companion. Every evening before bed I wrote. Not dramatic stories, just facts. Dates, conversations, amounts, who said what, where we were. I wasn't planning revenge. I simply wanted one place where the truth couldn't be interrupted. Soon, one notebook became 2, then 3. Years passed. Whenever something important happened, I wrote it down. Sometimes, Michael noticed. "What are you writing?" "Oh, just thoughts." He laughed. "You'll never read those again." I smiled. Maybe he was right. Maybe I never would. But writing changed something inside me. When someone constantly rewrites your reality, recording the truth becomes a way of reminding yourself that you're not imagining things. The journals became proof for me long before they became evidence for anyone else. Months after the investment disaster, another family dinner arrived. This time, someone joked about retirement planning. Rebecca laughed. "Dads usually write about money?" Michael smiled modestly. "Well, not always." Then he looked at me. "But Angela believed in that investment just as much as I did." Everyone chuckled. Again they looked toward me. Again I froze. This time it wasn't shock. It was exhaustion. Correcting him felt impossible. One lie had already become family history. Every repetition made it stronger. That was when I understood something terrifying. Michael wasn't just lying. He was practicing. Every time he repeated the same story, people remembered it a little more clearly. Eventually, they forgot there had ever been another version. And because I rarely challenged him, my silence became part of his evidence. From then on, every notebook entry ended the same way. One short sentence. Remember what really happened. I had no idea those journals would one day become the most valuable thing I owned, or that the man who laughed at them would someday beg me not to open them. The hardest part of losing someone's trust is that it rarely happens all at once. It disappears one small moment at a time. Looking back, I don't think Michael wanted our children to hate me. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he wanted something much more useful. He wanted them to doubt me. Doubt is quieter than hatred, and much harder to fight. Rebecca was always close to her father. As a little girl, she followed him everywhere. He taught her to ride a bicycle. He helped with math homework. He never missed a school recital. She adored him. When she became an adult, that admiration never changed. She called him every Sunday. If she had a problem at work, she called Dad. If she argued with her husband, she called Dad. If she wanted financial advice, she called Dad. I didn't resent their relationship. A daughter should be able to trust her father. I only wished she trusted her mother the same way. Ethan loved us both. But he hated conflict more than anything. Whenever tension appeared, he disappeared. He had learned that from growing up in our house. Keep your head down. Wait for the storm to pass. I often wondered if he realized where he had learned that habit. Probably not. Children absorb far more than parents realize. The first time I noticed Michael changing the children's opinion of me was almost by accident. Rebecca and her husband came over for dinner. We were talking about an old family vacation to the Smoky Mountains. I smiled. I remember Ethan refusing to get into the canoe. Ethan laughed. I was terrified. Before the conversation could continue, Michael chuckled. No, sweetheart. He looked at me kindly. You're thinking about the lake trip in Michigan. I frowned. No, it was Tennessee. Michael shook his head. I'm sure it was Michigan. Rebecca looked between us. Dad remembers details better than anyone. I stayed quiet. Later that night, I searched through an old photo album. The pictures clearly showed Tennessee. There were mountains in the background. The date was written in my handwriting. I carried the album downstairs. Michael. He looked up from the television. The trip was Tennessee. He barely glanced at the pictures. If you say so. I stared at him. You told everyone I was wrong. He shrugged. People misremember things. But I didn't. He smiled without looking away from the television. It isn't important. Maybe he was right. It wasn't important. Not by itself. But then it happened again. And again. One Christmas, I mentioned that Rebecca had loved peppermint ice cream as a child. Michael laughed. No, that was Ethan. Rebecca smiled. I think Dad's right. I knew she wasn't. I had made every birthday cake, packed every school lunch, held every doctor's appointment. I remembered my children's favorite foods, but once again, I stayed silent. Little corrections became impossible because every correction sounded defensive. One afternoon, Rebecca stopped by unexpectedly. We were drinking tea in the kitchen when she hesitated before speaking. Mom. Yes? Can I ask you something? Of course. She stirred her tea for a long moment. Have you ever thought about getting your memory checked? The spoon slipped from my fingers. What? She looked embarrassed. I don't mean anything bad. I know. Dad says you've been forgetting little things lately. For a second, I couldn't speak. Then I forced a smile. I forget things like everyone else. She nodded slowly. I guess. But she didn't sound convinced. That conversation stayed with me for weeks. Not because Rebecca had asked it, because Michael had planted it. Quietly, patiently, without me even noticing. Once people begin looking for signs of forgetfulness, they find them everywhere. Forget where you left your glasses. Proof. Call someone by the wrong name. Proof. Ask the same question twice. Proof. Suddenly, every normal mistake becomes evidence. Michael understood that better than I did. After that, I started paying attention. At family dinners, he would say things like, Angela, didn't we already talk about this? Or, honey, you've told that story twice. Sometimes I had. Sometimes I hadn't. No one could tell the difference anymore. Especially me. One Sunday after church, I overheard Rebecca talking quietly with Ethan. I worry about Mom. Ethan frowned. Why, she's been forgetting things. I haven't noticed. Dad has. Ethan didn't answer. That silence hurt. Not because he agreed, because he wasn't sure. For the first time, my own son wasn't certain he could trust what he saw. I walked away before they noticed me. That afternoon, I sat alone in the backyard. The wind moved gently through the maple tree Michael had planted when Rebecca was born. I cried harder than I had in years, not because my children doubted me, because I understood why. Michael never attacked me directly. He simply repeated tiny suggestions, over and over, until they sounded like concern instead of accusation. One evening, I finally asked him, "Why do you keep telling people I forget things?" He looked genuinely surprised. I don't. You tell Rebecca. I tell her you're getting older. So are you. He laughed. True. Then why don't you joke about your own memory? He smiled. Because mine is still pretty good. The conversation ended there. Or at least it looked like it had. A week later, we attended a neighborhood barbecue. One of our friends asked about a recipe I'd brought. Before I answered, Michael smiled. You'll have to forgive Angela if she forgets an ingredient. Everyone laughed politely, including me. Inside, I felt something break. I realized he no longer cared whether I heard him. He expected me to stay silent, and I always did. That expectation became his greatest weapon. Months later, Rebecca invited us to celebrate her promotion. The restaurant was crowded. Everyone was happy. Halfway through dinner, Rebecca said, "Mom, remember when you used to help me study for spelling tests?" I smiled. I remember every one of them. Before I could say anything else, Michael laughed. Angela remembers the big things. He reached for his glass. The little details sometimes slip away. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. I watched my daughter's face. She wasn't mocking me. She was worried, real worry, created by years of tiny lies. That hurt more than open cruelty ever could. Driving home that night, I looked out the passenger window. Streetlights passed one after another. Michael hummed softly with the radio. He looked perfectly relaxed. I suddenly realized something terrifying. He wasn't preparing our children to help me. He was preparing them not to believe me. And if that day ever came, if I ever needed to tell them the truth, they might already think I couldn't remember it. That thought followed me all the way home. I opened another notebook before bed. I wrote only one sentence that night. He isn't stealing my memory. He's stealing everyone else's faith in it. At the time, I believed that was the worst thing Michael had done. I was wrong. Much worse was still waiting for me. People often ask why I stayed. The answer isn't simple. It wasn't fear. It wasn't money. And it certainly wasn't because I didn't know something was wrong. I stayed because of a promise. A promise I made to the man who would later convince everyone that I couldn't be trusted. The irony still hurts. More than 20 years before our anniversary dinner, Michael came home looking like a different man. His shoulders were slumped. His face was pale. He didn't even loosen his tie. He simply walked into the kitchen, sat at the table, and stared at his hands. I had never seen him like that. I poured him a cup of coffee. Michael. He didn't answer. I sat beside him. What's happened? He whispered 3 words. I messed up. My heart started racing. What do you mean? He rubbed both hands across his face. I made some investments for myself. I frowned. I thought you always kept our finances separate from your clients. I did. So what happened? He looked at me with tears in his eyes. I borrowed against our home equity. I felt the room spinning. You what? I thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed. Michael, the market crashed. I couldn't breathe. How much? He told me the number. I won't repeat it now. Even today, it makes me sick. It was enough to destroy us. Enough to lose our house. Enough to end his career if anyone discovered what he had done. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. What happens now? He looked completely defeated. I don't know. That night, neither of us slept. I listened to him pacing the hallway until sunrise. The next morning, I opened the cedar chest at the foot of our bed. Inside was a velvet jewelry box. My mother's jewelry. Nothing extravagant. A diamond engagement ring that had belonged to my grandmother. A pearl necklace. A gold bracelet. A pair of sapphire earrings my father had saved for months to buy. Each piece carried a memory. Each piece carried love. I picked them up one by one. I remembered my mother's smile, her laughter, the way she hugged me, before she died. I closed the lid. Then I drove downtown. The jeweler examined every piece carefully. He gave me a number, lower than I hoped, higher than I expected. I accepted without negotiating. As I signed the paperwork, my hands trembled. It felt as though I wasn't selling jewelry. I was selling pieces of my family. When I returned home, Michael looked confused. "Where have you been?" I placed the cashier's check on the table. His eyes widened. "Angela, I sold Mom's jewelry." His face turned white. "No, we need the money." "You can't." "I already did." He picked up the check. His hands started shaking. "I don't deserve this." "No. You should hate me." Maybe I should have. Instead, I felt sorry for him. He looked broken, completely broken. Then he did something I had never seen before. He cried. Not quietly, not politely. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed. "I'm so sorry." "I know. I'll fix this." "I hope so." He reached for my hand. "Please." "What?" "Don't tell anyone." I looked at him. "Our children don't need to know." I stayed silent. He continued. "My career will be over." "I know. I'll never recover." He was right. One public scandal would have destroyed everything he had built. Finally, I nodded. "I won't tell anyone." He squeezed my hand tightly. "I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you." At that moment, I believed him. I truly did. For the next few years, Michael worked longer hours. He paid off the remaining debt. Slowly, we recovered financially. From the outside, everything looked normal again. But something inside me had changed. Whenever I looked at my empty jewelry box, I remembered what it had cost to save our family. Oddly enough, I never regretted selling those things. Jewelry can be replaced. People cannot. What I regretted was believing that sacrifice automatically changes someone. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people simply become comfortable with being rescued. Years passed. Michael never mentioned my mother's jewelry again. Not on birthdays, not on anniversaries. Not even when Rebecca admired an old photograph of my mother wearing the pearl necklace. "I wonder what happened to Grandma's jewelry," she asked once. I smiled. "Oh, I don't have it anymore." She nodded, assuming I'd sold it after retirement. I didn't explain. I had promised. That promise became another silence, another secret, another burden I carried alone. One evening, almost 10 years after I sold the jewelry, I found Michael looking through old tax papers. He didn't know I was standing in the doorway. I watched him carefully. He opened a folder. Inside was the receipt from the jewelry store. He looked at it for several seconds. Then he quietly placed it back inside the file cabinet. Not once did he come to me. Not once did he say, "Thank you." Instead, life continued as though my sacrifice had been ordinary, as though it had been expected. Looking back now, I think that was the moment I should have understood something important. Gratitude has an expiration date for selfish people. Once they feel safe, they stop remembering who saved them. I remembered. Every single day, especially when I walked past family heirlooms in antique stores. Sometimes I imagined what my mother would have said. She had always believed that love required sacrifice, but she also believed sacrifice should be respected. I wonder what she would have thought if she had seen how my story ended. Years later, during one of our arguments, Michael accidentally revealed something that stayed with me. He was frustrated because I questioned a financial decision. He sighed dramatically. "You always act like you're the one who's sacrificed." The words hit me harder than he realized. I stared at him. "What did you just say?" He looked away. "I didn't mean—" "No," I interrupted him. "You did." For the first time in years, I reminded him. "I sold everything my mother left me." "I know." "I saved our house." "I know." "I protected your career." "I know." He rubbed his forehead impatiently. "That was a long time ago." Those 7 words changed something inside me forever. That was a long time ago. To him, my greatest sacrifice had become old news, something outdated, something no longer worth mentioning. But to me, it had never stopped costing me. That night, I opened another journal. Instead of writing facts, I wrote a single question. If someone forgets your sacrifice, will they eventually forget the truth behind it too? I closed the notebook. I had no idea that the answer was yes. Not only would Michael forget, he would eventually rewrite the entire story. And when he did, he wouldn't hesitate to make me the villain instead of the woman who had saved him. By the time I turned 62, I had become an expert at pretending everything was fine. Apparently, so had Michael. Rebecca insisted on hosting my birthday dinner that year. "It has to be special, Mom," she said over the phone. "No cooking. You deserve to relax." I smiled. "That sounds wonderful." She invited everyone. Her husband Ethan and his wife, a few close family friends, and even Patricia, one of Michael's old colleagues from church. The dining room was warm and lively. Candles flickered across the table. Someone put on soft jazz in the background. For a moment, I almost forgot how complicated my life had become. Rebecca handed me a beautifully wrapped gift. "Happy birthday, Mom." I hugged her tightly. "Thank you, sweetheart." For a little while, everything felt normal. We laughed, shared old stories, passed dishes around the table. Then Michael decided it was time to perform. Rebecca asked me how retirement was treating me. Before I could answer, Michael chuckled. "I keep Angela busy." Everyone smiled. I laughed politely. Then he added, "If I didn't remind her where she put her glasses every day, she'd probably spend half her life looking for them." A few people laughed. I forced myself to smile. Rebecca grinned. "Mom, you really lose your glasses that much." "I misplace them sometimes." Michael nodded dramatically. "Sometimes." He laughed again. "Yesterday she looked for them for 20 minutes. He paused. "They were already on her head." The table burst into laughter. I laughed too. Not because it was funny, because I didn't know what else to do. The truth, that story had happened once, almost 3 years earlier. He had simply waited for the perfect audience. A few minutes later, Ethan asked whether I'd started reading a new mystery novel. Before I answered, Michael leaned back in his chair. "She starts books." He smiled, "then forgets who the murderer is halfway through." More laughter. Someone joked, "Maybe that's the secret to enjoying mysteries twice." Everyone chuckled, except me, because that wasn't true either. I remembered every novel I'd ever loved. I could still recite entire passages from books I had read 20 years earlier, but correcting Michael over something so small felt impossible. Rebecca looked at me with gentle concern. "Mom." "I'm fine." She hesitated. "Maybe you should write things down more." I almost laughed. If only she knew. I had been writing everything down for 15 years, just not for the reason she imagined. Dinner continued. Michael kept slipping in little comments. So glad Angela remembered we were eating at 6. I almost had to remind her. Or, good thing I handle the bills. Little jokes. Always followed by a smile. Always harmless enough that objecting would make me seem overly sensitive. That was his gift. Every insult wore a friendly face. After dessert, Rebecca disappeared into the kitchen. When she returned, she wasn't carrying cake. She was carrying concern. She sat beside me. Mom, I looked at her. Can I ask you something? Of course. She took a deep breath. I've been thinking. My stomach tightened. I think maybe we should schedule a doctor's appointment. I blinked. What for? A memory evaluation. The room became very quiet. I looked around the table. No one spoke. Michael reached over and gently rubbed my shoulder. I'm sure everything's fine. He sounded compassionate, supportive, the perfect husband. Rebecca quickly added, It's only to be safe. I couldn't find any words, not because I was confused, because I suddenly understood exactly what had been happening. This wasn't spontaneous. Michael had been preparing this conversation for months, maybe years. Every joke, every correction, every tiny story. They all led here. Rebecca wasn't accusing me. She genuinely believed she was helping. That realization hurt more than anything Michael had ever said. I smiled softly. I appreciate your concern. Rebecca reached for my hand. We love you. I know. And early treatment helps if... She couldn't finish the sentence. I squeezed her hand. I understand. Michael looked at me. His expression was impossible to read. Almost satisfied, as though another piece had fallen perfectly into place. The birthday cake finally arrived. Everyone sang. I blew out the candles. Someone asked what I wished for. I smiled. I'll keep that to myself. But I remember exactly what I wished. I wished that one person in that room would believe me without asking for proof. That wish never came true. Later that evening, after everyone left, I quietly loaded the dishwasher. Michael dried the last plate. He seemed cheerful. Nice party. I didn't answer. He glanced at me. What's wrong? I turned slowly. Did you enjoy that? What? Making our daughter think I'm losing my mind. His smile disappeared. Angela. No. I interrupted him. Answer me. He sighed. You're overreacting. I am. Rebecca loves you. Because she thinks I'm sick. She was worried. Because you made her worried. Michael shook his head. I never told her you were sick. You didn't have to. He placed the dish towel on the counter. I've only mentioned little things. Exactly. You're making too much of this. I stared at him. Am I? He looked annoyed now. If your memory is fine, why are you so upset? I froze. There it was. Another trap. If I became emotional, that proved something was wrong. If I stayed calm, he would say I was avoiding the issue. There was no correct answer. I quietly walked upstairs. Behind me, I heard him call out. I was only trying to help. Those words echoed in my head all night, trying to help. The next morning, Rebecca called. Mom! Hi, sweetheart. I hope I didn't upset you yesterday. You didn't. I just love you. I know. She hesitated. If you ever want me to go with you to the doctor... I closed my eyes. Thank you. After we hung up, I walked into my study. I opened the cabinet where I kept every journal. Row after row. 15 years of truth. I ran my fingers across the notebooks. For the first time, I wondered if they might someday save more than my memory. Maybe they would save my name. That afternoon, while putting away old insurance papers in Michael's home office, I accidentally knocked over a cardboard storage box hidden behind the filing cabinet. Bank statements spilled across the floor. Several envelopes were marked confidential. None of them looked familiar. I bent down to gather them. Then I noticed one account number. It wasn't any account I recognized, and for the first time in years, my concern shifted. Maybe Michael wasn't trying to convince everyone that I couldn't remember the truth. Maybe he was making sure that no one would believe me when I finally discovered it. I didn't mean to find the documents. If that cardboard box hadn't tipped over, I might have lived the rest of my life believing Michael's lies. Sometimes, the truth doesn't arrive with a loud crash. Sometimes, it falls quietly onto the carpet at your feet. I knelt beside the scattered papers. Most of them looked ordinary. Old insurance statements, tax documents, retirement forms. Then I noticed something strange. A bank statement from an account I had never seen before. Michael and I had always shared our finances. At least, I thought we had. I picked up the statement. The account wasn't in our joint bank. It belonged to another financial institution across town. There was only one name on it. Michael Foster. No mention of me. I frowned. Maybe it was an old account. Maybe it had been closed years ago. Then I checked the date. 3 months earlier. My pulse quickened. I looked through the remaining pages. There were more statements. Every month. For nearly 4 years. How could I not know this account existed? I carefully stacked the papers exactly as I had found them. Then I noticed another envelope. Inside were credit card statements. Again, an account I had never seen. I wasn't angry yet, mostly confused. Michael had always insisted we discussed every important financial decision together. So why hide these? I heard the garage door opening. He was home. Quickly, I returned everything to the box exactly as I had found it. By the time he walked into the office, I was dusting a bookshelf. He smiled. Cleaning again? I thought this room could use it. He kissed my forehead. I appreciate you. Those words felt different now, almost rehearsed. That evening, while Michael watched television, I couldn't stop thinking about the hidden account. I wanted to ask him directly. But something stopped me. Not fear. Instinct. If Michael had hidden those documents, he wouldn't tell me the truth simply because I asked. For the first time in years, I decided not to confront him. Instead, I decided to observe him. The next morning, he left to play golf with friends. The moment his car disappeared down the street, I walked straight back into the office. The box was still there. This time, I photographed every document with my phone. Then I noticed something even stranger. Almost every month included transfers to another account. The same amount. Over and over. Sometimes $2,000, sometimes $3,000, occasionally even $5,000. There was no explanation, just electronic transfers. The destination account number was partially hidden. I couldn't identify the owner. I opened another folder. More statements, loan payments, credit card balances, cash withdrawals, large cash withdrawals. Michael had always criticized people who used cash. He said it made budgeting impossible, yet here he was withdrawing thousands of dollars. Nothing made sense. I sat at his desk and opened one of my journals. I compared dates. Suddenly, patterns began appearing. One withdrawal matched the week Michael claimed he had attended a financial conference. Another matched a weekend he said he was helping an old friend move. Another matched the birthday dinner, where he told everyone I was becoming forgetful. Coincidence, maybe, but my instincts whispered otherwise. I copied every account number into my notebook, every date, every amount. Then I returned every page exactly where it belonged. That evening, Michael seemed unusually cheerful. "You've been quiet today." "I've been reading." "What book?" I almost smiled. Usually he answered questions for me. Tonight, he was asking them. "A mystery," he laughed. "Those are your favorite." I looked directly into his eyes. They usually end with someone discovering the truth. For a brief second, his smile faded. Only for a second. Then it returned. "I suppose they do." I wondered if he realized I wasn't talking about the book. Over the next few weeks, I became someone I barely recognized. I watched. I listened. I noticed everything. Michael checked the mailbox before I could. Every day. He shredded certain envelopes immediately. He started carrying his phone everywhere, even into the shower. If I walked into a room unexpectedly, he sometimes flipped his phone face down. Had he always done that? Or had I simply never paid attention? One afternoon, Rebecca stopped by. She found me organizing old paperwork. "You've become quite the accountant." I smiled. "I'm just trying to stay organized." She laughed. "Dad always says you're terrible with numbers." I almost answered. Then I stopped. Instead, I simply smiled. Not because I agreed, because I had learned something. Michael expected my silence. Now, I intended to use it against him. Every evening after he fell asleep, I updated my journal. Not with feelings, with facts, dates, transactions, behavior, times he left the house, phone calls, anything unusual. For the first time in years, writing didn't feel defensive. It felt strategic. About a month later, Michael announced he was driving to Cincinnati for a retirement luncheon. "I'll probably be home late." I nodded. "Drive safely." The moment he left, I checked the calendar. Something felt wrong. Retirement luncheon. On a Tuesday, Michael usually met retired colleagues on Thursdays. I waited until he was gone. Then I opened the kitchen drawer where he kept spare receipts. Nothing. No invitation. No directions. No hotel reservation. Nothing at all. When he returned that night, I asked casually, "How was Cincinnati?" He smiled while taking off his jacket. "Nice." "What restaurant?" He hesitated. "The Riverside Grill." I nodded. "I've never heard of it." "It's new." Later, after he went to bed, I searched online. There was no Riverside Grill in Cincinnati. Not one. For several minutes, I stared at the screen. A strange feeling settled over me. I wasn't catching little lies anymore. I was uncovering an entirely separate life. The next morning, I drove to the bank where we kept our joint accounts. I requested copies of several statements. The manager knew me well. As she printed them, I noticed something interesting. Large transfers had left our joint account on the exact same days money appeared in Michael's secret account. He hadn't been earning extra income. He had been moving our money. Quietly. Without my knowledge. Without my signature. Without a single conversation. I drove home with the statements tucked safely inside my purse. For years, I had believed Michael's greatest deception was convincing people I couldn't remember things. Now I realized that had only been preparation. If anyone ever questioned missing money, who would believe the forgetful wife? That afternoon, I bought a small fireproof lockbox. I placed inside it photographs of every bank statement, copies of the joint account records, my journals, and the receipt from selling my mother's jewelry. Then I hid the box in the attic beneath old Christmas decorations. For the first time in years, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt ready. Because whatever Michael was hiding, I finally had proof that his story and the truth were no longer the same. I still didn't know where the money was going, but I was closer than I had ever been, and I had no intention of stopping now. For 3 nights, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those bank transfers. Thousands of dollars. Month after month. Going somewhere Michael never wanted me to see. I considered hiring a private investigator. I even looked up a few online. Then I closed my laptop. Not yet. I still didn't know enough. One afternoon, while organizing the photographs I'd taken of the bank statements, I noticed something I had missed before. Every transfer included a partial account holder reference. Only initials. PH. The letters meant nothing at first. Then another envelope gave me a clue. Inside was a printed receipt. Transfer completed to Patricia Hayes. I stared at the name. Patricia Hayes. I had never heard Michael mention anyone by that name, not once. My first thought was immediate. Another woman. I hated myself for thinking it. But after weeks of discovering hidden accounts and secret money, it seemed like the obvious answer. I wasn't jealous. I was exhausted. Had there really been someone else all these years? I searched through old address books. Nothing. I checked social media. There were dozens of Patricia Hayeses. None meant anything to me. For 2 days, I said nothing. I watched Michael carefully. Every time his phone vibrated, I wondered if it was her. Every time he smiled at a message, I wondered who had sent it. The questions multiplied faster than the answers. Then something unexpected happened. Michael left his reading glasses at home. He called me around noon. Angela. Yes. I forgot my glasses. I noticed. Could you bring them to the church office? Of course. When I arrived, he was meeting with another volunteer. I'll only be a minute, he said. While I waited in the lobby, I noticed an elderly woman arranging flowers near the entrance. She smiled warmly. You must be Angela. I looked surprised. I'm sorry. Have we met? She smiled. No. But Michael has spoken about you. Something inside me tightened. I'm Patricia. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Patricia. Patricia Hayes. She looked nothing like I had imagined. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't secretive. She looked to be in her early 70s. Gray hair, gentle eyes, simple clothes. She smiled kindly. It's nice to finally meet you. Finally, Michael had spoken about me. I forced a smile. It's nice to meet you too. She tilted her head. I've wanted to thank you. My heart skipped. For what? She looked confused. For understanding Michael. What do you mean? She hesitated. I shouldn't keep you. Just then, Michael walked into the lobby. The moment he saw Patricia standing beside me, the color drained from his face. He recovered quickly. Angela. His smile looked forced. You've met Patricia. I have. Patricia smiled warmly. Your wife is lovely. Michael nodded. She certainly is. For the first time in years, I noticed genuine panic in his eyes. He wanted this conversation to end, quickly. On the drive home, dozens of questions raced through my mind. Who was Patricia? Why had Michael never mentioned her? Why had she thanked me? That evening I said nothing. Neither did he. The next morning, I returned to my journals. There had to be another clue. Hours later, I found one. Nearly 18 years earlier, I had written about a strange phone call. Michael had answered it. After hanging up, he told me, wrong number. At the time, I hadn't questioned it. Now I wondered, could it have been Patricia? I decided to find out. A few days later, I drove back to the church. Patricia happened to be there alone. She smiled when she saw me. "Angela, I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." I took a deep breath. "I was wondering." "Yes. How do you know Michael?" Her smile softened. "Oh, I'm his sister." Everything inside me stopped. "His sister?" She nodded. "My half-sister?" I stared at her. Michael had a sister. We had been married for 37 years. He had never once mentioned having a sister. Patricia noticed my expression. "He never told you?" It wasn't a question. I slowly shook my head. She sighed. "Our father left when Michael was very young." "I know that much." "He started another family." She smiled sadly. "I'm from that family." I sat down beside her. For nearly an hour, she told me everything. Years earlier, after their father died, Michael had reached out. They slowly built a relationship. Not close, but real. They met occasionally, called on birthdays, helped one another when they could. Patricia smiled. "He's always worried about protecting people." I almost laughed. Instead, I asked carefully, "Has he been helping you financially?" She looked embarrassed. "A little." "I hope you don't mind me asking." She shook her head. "My pension isn't much." Michael insisted. He said he wanted to make up for lost years. I nodded quietly. Part of me felt relieved. There wasn't another woman. There wasn't an affair. There was simply a family member I had never known existed. Yet something still didn't fit. The bank transfers were too large. Far larger than occasional help for an elderly sister. Before leaving, I asked one final question. "Do you know exactly how much he sends?" Patricia frowned. "No. I never check." "You don't?" She smiled. "I trust him." Those words lingered in my mind all the way home. I trust him. Once, I had said the same thing. That night, I compared Patricia's story with the bank statements. The amount still bothered me. Even generous support couldn't explain everything. Some months, the transfers exceeded $5,000. Why would an elderly woman need that much? Unless she never received all of it. A new possibility formed. What if Patricia wasn't the reason for the transfers? What if she was simply the destination Michael wanted anyone investigating to see? I suddenly remembered something from years earlier. Michael had once told me, "The safest hiding place is one nobody thinks to question." At the time, he had been talking about investment strategies. Now those words felt very different. I opened my notebook. Across a blank page, I wrote, "Patricia is not the mystery, she's the cover." For the first time since discovering the secret account, I no longer believed I was looking for another relationship. I believed I was looking at something much darker. Someone had been using Patricia's account, or hiding behind it. The only question left was, who and why. I was about to find out. Once I stopped believing Michael's explanations, every piece of evidence started fitting together. Not perfectly, but enough to tell me I had been asking the wrong question. The question was never, who is Patricia Hayes? The real question was, what is Michael hiding behind Patricia Hayes? I couldn't ask Patricia directly. She trusted her brother. If I accused him without proof, I would only hurt an innocent woman. So I kept digging. One afternoon, I spread every copied bank statement across my dining room table. I arranged them by date, transfers from our joint account, deposits into Michael's secret account, transfers to Patricia's account, cash withdrawals, credit card payments. For nearly 3 hours, I studied the numbers. Then something jumped out at me. The money almost never stayed in Patricia's account. It moved again, within 24 hours, sometimes within minutes. I hadn't noticed before because the statements were in different folders. Now the pattern was obvious. Money entered, money left, always quickly, almost as if Patricia's account was only passing it through. I whispered to myself, "Where does it go next?" That question consumed me. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Patricia called. I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number. "Angela?" "Yes." "This is Patricia." "Hello? I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all." She hesitated. I wondered if we could have coffee sometime. I agreed. 2 days later, we met at a small cafe halfway between our homes. Patricia looked tired, older than I remembered. After a few minutes of polite conversation, she lowered her voice. "I need to ask you something." "Of course." "Has Michael seemed different lately?" I kept my face calm. "What do you mean?" She stirred her coffee without looking at me. "He asks for money more often." I blinked. "I'm sorry." She looked embarrassed. "He says it's temporary." I stared at her. "I thought he was helping you." She looked confused. "He does." "Sometimes." Then she added something that changed everything. "But lately I've been helping him too." My heart nearly stopped. "You've been sending money back." She nodded. "He always pays me back." "Eventually." I took a slow breath. "Why does he need it?" "He says investments." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because I had heard those words before. Investments, the same word that had cost us our retirement savings years earlier. I asked carefully, "How much?" She looked uncomfortable. "I've never added it up." "Roughly." She thought for a moment. "Maybe 50,000. I nearly dropped my coffee cup. $50,000. She looked at me nervously. "Is something wrong?" I forced a smile. "No." Inside, everything was falling apart. When we said goodbye, Patricia hugged me warmly. "I've always wanted a sister." Those words broke my heart. She had no idea she had been used. The moment I reached my car, I opened my notebook. For the first time, I wrote a single word in capital letters. Gambling. I didn't know it for certain, but suddenly everything made sense. Hidden cash withdrawals, secret accounts, constant requests for temporary money. No visible investments, money disappearing overnight. I drove straight home. Instead of confronting Michael, I searched through years of paperwork again. This time, I looked for casinos, hotels, entertainment expenses. At first, I found nothing. Michael had been careful. Very careful. Then I noticed several ATM withdrawals. Each occurred within walking distance of the same casino across the state line. Not one, not two, more than 20. Different dates, different years, always near that same casino. I sat back in my chair. The room felt cold. Michael wasn't investing. He was gambling. Every lie, every secret account, every transfer, every dollar. It all pointed to the same place. I suddenly remembered something Patricia had said. "He always pays me back." Not always. Sometimes. That explained why he needed her account. When he won, he repaid her. When he lost, he borrowed more. The account created confusion. Anyone reviewing the records would think he was helping an elderly sister, not financing a gambling addiction. That evening, Michael came home humming. He kissed my cheek. Good day. I looked at him. Fine. What did you do? I organized papers. He froze. Only for a heartbeat. Then he smiled. You've been doing a lot of that lately. I enjoy organizing. He laughed. I married a librarian. You did? He walked toward the refrigerator. I watched him carefully. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of him. I was studying him. That night while he slept, I quietly checked his jacket pocket. Inside was a casino rewards card. I stared at it for several seconds. Proof. Not absolute proof, but enough. The next morning, I placed the card exactly where I had found it. Michael never noticed. Over the next several weeks, I confirmed everything. He visited casinos during supposed business lunches, during retirement luncheons, during golf outings, during church conferences. The excuses changed. The destination never did. One afternoon, I sat alone in my study surrounded by journals. I read the entry about the failed investment 15 years earlier. Then another. Then another. A terrible realization hit me. Maybe that investment hadn't failed because Michael made a mistake. Maybe he had already been gambling back then. Maybe he had needed another story to explain missing money. How many lies had I mistaken for bad luck? How many disasters had actually been choices I no longer knew? What I did know was this: Michael hadn't simply lied to me. He had stolen from our future, then convinced everyone I was the unreliable one. That evening, I looked through old family photographs. Rebecca's graduation, Ethan's wedding, Christmas mornings, vacations. Every smiling picture now carried another invisible memory. While we smiled for the camera, Michael had been living a secret life, and I had been blamed whenever something didn't make sense. I closed the album. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't overwhelmed by sadness. I was angry. Not loud anger, not explosive anger. The quiet kind, the dangerous kind. Because quiet anger plans carefully. And I had spent my entire marriage learning how to stay quiet. Michael thought silence protected him. He had no idea my silence had become something else entirely. It had become patience. And patience was about to expose every lie he had ever told. After discovering the gambling, I understood something important. The truth alone wasn't enough. I needed the truth to come out at exactly the right moment. If I confronted Michael too early, he would deny everything. If I accused him without witnesses, he would twist the story. He had spent decades controlling every conversation. I wasn't going to give him another chance. So I waited. 3 weeks later, Rebecca invited everyone to Sunday dinner. She wanted the whole family together before Ethan and his wife left for a 2-week vacation. Michael seemed unusually relaxed. He had no idea I knew about the hidden accounts, or the casinos, or Patricia, or the money. He believed he was still the only person holding secrets. Dinner started peacefully. Rebecca served roast chicken. Ethan opened a bottle of sparkling cider. Everyone laughed about old family memories. I watched Michael carefully. He was charming, funny, attentive. Anyone walking into that room would have believed he was the perfect husband. Halfway through dinner, Rebecca mentioned something that changed the evening. Mom. I looked up. I found a wonderful neurologist. I already knew where this was going. I thought maybe... She hesitated. We could make an appointment next month. The room became quiet. Ethan looked uncomfortable. His wife glanced down at her plate. Michael gently reached across the table and covered my hand with his. I've been telling Angela the same thing. His voice sounded calm, kind, patient. If everything's fine, the test will give everyone peace of mind. Everyone looked at me, waiting. I smiled softly. I appreciate the concern. Michael nodded as though he were relieved. Then he added the sentence I will never forget. The problem is, he sighed dramatically. Angela never answers when something is wrong. Rebecca looked at me sadly. Dad's right. I felt my chest tighten. Michael continued. For years, whenever I ask her something important, he looked around the table. She just stays silent. A pause. Then he smiled sadly. You know what silence usually means. Nobody answered, so he answered for them. It means there's something you don't want to admit. I looked at him. He held my gaze confidently. He truly believed he had already won. Rebecca reached for my hand. Mom! I didn't answer. Ethan leaned forward. Mom! Still nothing. Michael slowly shook his head. There it is. He sounded almost heartbroken. The silence. He looked toward Rebecca. I've lived with it for years. Something inside me remained perfectly calm. Not because his words didn't hurt, because I had expected them. This was exactly what he always did. Speak first, control the room, define my silence before I had the chance to. Rebecca whispered, Mom, please say something. I looked at my daughter. Her eyes were filled with worry, real worry, not judgment. She still believed she was trying to help me. That made what I had to do even harder. I opened my mouth. Then I closed it again. Michael almost smiled. He thought my silence meant surrender. It didn't. It meant timing. He kept talking. I've tried everything. I've been patient. I've defended Angela for years. He placed a hand over his heart. But you can't help someone who refuses to speak. His performance was flawless. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed him too. Rebecca quietly wiped away a tear. I just want Mom to be okay. Michael nodded sympathetically. So do I. Those 3 words nearly made me laugh. Instead, I lowered my eyes. Michael leaned back in his chair, satisfied. He believed the conversation was over. After dinner, everyone moved into the living room. Michael stood beside the fireplace, talking with Ethan. I stayed in the kitchen, helping Rebecca wash dishes. She looked exhausted. I'm sorry. For what? I shouldn't have brought it up. I gently touched her shoulder. You were trying to help. She nodded. I just hate seeing you like this. I smiled sadly. I know. She looked at me carefully. Mom. Yes. Why don't you defend yourself? That question pierced deeper than anything else. I wanted to tell her. Because every time I tried, your father rewrote my words. Because he spent years convincing you not to believe me. Because I was protecting him. Instead, I simply said, sometimes speaking too early changes nothing. She frowned. I don't understand. I know. She hugged me before leaving the kitchen. As I watched her walk away, I realized just how much had been stolen from us. Not money, not jewelry, trust. Michael had stolen trust. And without trust, every relationship eventually begins to crumble. Later that night, after everyone left, Michael looked unusually pleased. He loosened his tie. Proud of yourself? I asked. He looked surprised. What do you mean, the performance? He chuckled. I don't know what you're talking about. You made everyone think I was hiding something. He shrugged. You never denied it. I looked directly at him. You think silence always means guilt. He smiled confidently. If someone has nothing to hide, he paused. Why stay silent? For several seconds, we simply looked at each other. Then I smiled. Not politely, not sadly, just quietly. He frowned. What? Nothing. He seemed uncomfortable. Why are you smiling? I turned toward the stairs. Good night, Michael. That smile followed me upstairs, because for the first time in our marriage, I knew something he didn't. He believed I was trapped. He believed I had no way to fight back. He believed my silence proved his story. He didn't realize my silence had become the final piece of evidence. The next morning, I drove to the bank, then to my attorney, then back home. Inside my purse sat copies of every statement, every journal, every receipt, every transfer, every withdrawal. Everything was organized chronologically, exactly the way a librarian would organize the truth. When I returned home, Michael was watering flowers in the front yard. He smiled and waved. I waved back. He had no idea. The game he had controlled for nearly 4 decades was finally ending. He thought my silence had given him victory. He didn't understand that silence can also be preparation. And I had spent 37 years preparing for the one conversation he would never be able to interrupt. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Rebecca called on a Thursday afternoon. Mom, hi, sweetheart. I've been thinking about Sunday. So have I. I don't want us to leave things the way they are. Neither did I. She took a deep breath. Can everyone come over tomorrow night? Tomorrow. I've invited Ethan and his wife. She hesitated. And Dad already said yes. I closed my eyes for a moment. This was it. Not because I had planned it, because the moment had finally arrived. I'll be there. That evening, I unlocked the fireproof box hidden beneath the Christmas decorations. For nearly 2 hours, I organized everything. The journals, the bank statements, the casino rewards card, the transfer records, the receipt from the jewelry store, the loan documents from 20 years earlier. Every page went into a neat binder. No loose papers, no confusion, no emotion, just facts. As I closed the binder, I whispered to myself, tomorrow, no one will speak for me. The next evening, Rebecca's living room felt strangely familiar. The same couch, the same family photographs, the same people. Only this time, I wasn't afraid. Michael greeted everyone with his usual warmth. He hugged Ethan, complimented Rebecca's cooking, joked with the grandchildren. If someone had filmed only those first 20 minutes, they would have believed he was the perfect husband and father. Dinner passed quietly. No one mentioned my memory. No one mentioned doctors. I almost wondered if Michael had changed his mind. Then dessert arrived. Rebecca smiled nervously. I'm glad we're all together. Michael nodded. So am I. She looked at me. Mom! I knew. She was trying one more time. I hope you know we're only worried because we love you. I know. Michael leaned forward. Angela. His voice sounded gentle. If there's something you haven't told us. He paused. This is the time. Everyone looked at me. He smiled sadly. Please. You don't have to stay silent anymore. There it was, the same trap, Only this time, I stepped into it willingly. I slowly stood. No one spoke. Michael watched me confidently. He expected tears, excuses, confusion. Instead, I calmly placed the thick binder on Rebecca's dining table. The sound echoed through the room. Michael frowned. "What is that?" I looked directly at him. "You've spent years telling everyone my silence meant guilt." He smiled politely. "I never said—" I raised one hand. For the first time in 37 years, he stopped talking. I wasn't finished. The room became completely silent. I continued. "You were right about one thing." Michael blinked. I stayed silent. Rebecca looked confused. Ethan stared at me. I rested my hand on the binder. "But you were wrong about why?" Michael folded his arms. "Angela?" Again, I interrupted him. "No. My turn." His face changed, only slightly, but enough for me to see. He wasn't comfortable anymore. I opened the binder. The first page was a copy of the receipt from the jewelry store. I slid it across the table. Rebecca picked it up. "What is this?" I answered quietly. "The receipt for my mother's jewelry." She frowned. "You sold it 22 years ago." "Why?" I looked directly at Michael. "To save your father." Nobody moved. I continued speaking calmly. "Your father borrowed against our home. He lost the money. He begged me not to tell anyone. So I sold everything my mother left me." Rebecca slowly looked toward Michael. "Dad?" He forced a smile. Before he could continue, I opened the next section. Loan documents, bank records, canceled debts, every page dated, every page organized. I paid the debt. I protected his career. I protected this family. And I kept his secret. Ethan quietly whispered, "Mom." I nodded. That's why I stayed silent. I turned another page, then another. Out came copies of my journals. Rebecca looked shocked. "You wrote all this for 15 years?" Michael finally spoke. "Angela?" "No." Again. "My turn." He fell silent. I continued. Every conversation, every financial decision, every lie. I wrote them all down. The room felt frozen. Rebecca slowly flipped through one journal. The dates matched. The family dinners, the failed investment, the stories about my memory, everything. Then I placed the casino rewards card on the table. Michael's face lost all color. Nobody said a word. Finally, I spoke again. "You told everyone my silence meant I had something to hide." I looked directly into his eyes. "But my silence protected you." I paused. "You were never protecting me." "You were protecting yourself." Rebecca's voice trembled. "Dad!" Michael reached for the casino card. I calmly placed my hand on top of it first. "Not yet." He looked at me. There was no confidence left in his eyes, only fear. Real fear. I continued. "I know about the secret account." His breathing changed. "I know about Patricia." Rebecca frowned. "Who's Patricia?" I answered. "Your father's half-sister." Everyone looked stunned. "I met her. I spoke with her. I know she believed she was helping him." Michael whispered, "Angela." I ignored him. I know the money passed through her account. I know about the gambling. I know about the withdrawals. I know about every lie. Then I picked up the final journal. The saddest part, I looked around the room, is that I never kept these journals to expose my husband. I smiled sadly. I kept them because he spent years convincing me I couldn't trust my own memory. Rebecca began crying. Ethan covered his mouth with one hand. Michael stared at the table. He didn't interrupt me again, not once. For the first time in our marriage, the entire room had heard my voice before hearing his. And somehow, that changed everything. No one moved. No one even reached for dessert. The only sound in the room was Rebecca quietly crying. Michael stared at the binder as if it had appeared by magic. For years, he had controlled every conversation. Now, he couldn't find a single word. Rebecca finally broke the silence. She picked up the casino rewards card. "Dad." Her voice shook. "What is this?" Michael swallowed. "I can explain." I looked at him calmly. "Please do." He glanced toward me, then toward Ethan, then back to Rebecca. "It isn't what it looks like." Ethan spoke for the first time. "What does it look like?" Michael hesitated. "I only went there a few times." Without saying a word, I slid another document across the table. A printed list of ATM withdrawals, each highlighted, each dated, each within walking distance of the same casino. Rebecca slowly counted them. "There are..." She looked again. 26. Michael lowered his eyes. You said a few." He rubbed his forehead. "I don't remember every visit." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who had spent years questioning my memory had suddenly developed problems with his own. I didn't smile. I simply opened another section of the binder. Bank transfers, hidden account, cash withdrawals, Patricia's account. Every page was numbered, every transaction highlighted, every date matched. Rebecca stared at the paperwork. Then she looked at me. "You organized all this." I nodded. "Over many years." Michael tried again. "Angela is making this look worse than it was." I quietly handed Rebecca another journal. "Read the date." She opened it. Her eyes scanned the page. "This says..." She frowned. "The first secret account existed 4 years ago." I nodded. "Now check the bank statement." She did. The dates matched exactly. Ethan leaned over. "So do these." Michael cleared his throat. "There are explanations." I looked at him. I've been waiting 37 years to hear one. He looked toward Rebecca. "I was trying to protect the family." I couldn't stay silent. "You protected yourself." He shook his head. "No." "You don't understand," I answered quietly. "Then help us understand." For several seconds, he said nothing. Finally, he pointed toward Patricia's name. "I was helping my sister." Rebecca looked at me. "You said that wasn't the whole story." "It isn't." I slid forward another document. Patricia's handwritten note. She had written down every loan she believed she had given Michael. Every repayment. Every date. Rebecca compared the note with the bank statements. "They don't match." "No. They're thousands of dollars apart." "Yes." Michael spoke quickly. "She forgot." I answered immediately. "No. She trusted you." The room fell silent again. Ethan took the papers. He spread them across the dining table. His engineering background had always made him methodical. Within minutes, he noticed the same pattern I had. Money goes into Patricia's account. He traced the transfers with his finger, then disappears almost immediately. He looked at Michael. Where did it go? Michael looked away. I don't know. I reached into the binder one final time. I removed photographs of casino surveillance receipts I had obtained through my attorney after requesting financial records during preliminary legal consultation. The dates matched the withdrawals. The amounts matched almost perfectly. Rebecca stared at the receipts. Dad, her voice cracked. Were you gambling? Michael didn't answer. Rebecca asked again. Were you... Nothing. Finally, Ethan spoke. Answer her. Michael closed his eyes. His shoulders dropped. He suddenly looked much older. Years older. I made mistakes. Rebecca burst into tears. Mistakes! She held up the casino receipts. You let me think Mom was losing her memory. You let me believe she needed medical tests. You watched me cry over her. Michael whispered, I never wanted that. I couldn't stop myself. But you allowed it. He didn't argue, because he couldn't. Every excuse had already collapsed under the weight of the documents. Ethan slowly looked toward me. I'm sorry. Those two words nearly broke me. I smiled sadly. You don't owe me an apology. Yes. He wiped his eyes. I should have listened. I should have noticed. You tried to tell us. I shook my head. No. I stayed silent. Rebecca looked at me through tears. Why? I answered honestly. Because I promised your father I would protect him. She stared at Michael in disbelief. You knew... He couldn't meet her eyes. You knew Mom sold Grandma's jewelry. He nodded. You let her carry that secret alone. He nodded again. Rebecca covered her face with both hands. Oh my God. Michael reached toward her. She stepped back. Don't. He froze. I need you to tell me one thing. Her voice was shaking. When you kept saying Mom forgot things. She swallowed hard. Did you know she didn't? Michael looked at the floor. Another long silence. Then, very quietly, yeah. The room seemed to stop breathing. Rebecca slowly sat down. She wasn't crying anymore. She simply looked empty. Ethan spoke next. So, every joke. Michael closed his eyes. Yes. Every correction. Yes. You wanted us to doubt Mom. He whispered. I didn't think. I interrupted. No. You thought very carefully. For years. Michael looked at me. There was no anger in his face now, only defeat. For the first time in our marriage, he wasn't trying to win. He knew he couldn't. Rebecca slowly closed the binder. Then she looked at me. I believe you. Those 3 words healed something inside me that I thought had been lost forever. Not because they erased the past, because they gave me back something Michael had taken long ago. My own voice. For years, every truth I spoke had been questioned, every memory doubted, every silence interpreted for me. Now, without raising my voice, without arguing, without humiliating anyone, the truth had spoken for itself. Michael finally understood something I had learned long ago. Facts don't need to shout. They only need to survive long enough to be heard. and mine had survived. Every single one. No one left after the truth came out. It was as if we all understood that walking away before hearing everything would leave the story unfinished. Michael remained seated at the dining table. His shoulders were bent. His eyes stayed fixed on the binder. For the first time since I had known him, he looked like a man who had run out of words. Rebecca finally broke the silence. "Dad." He looked up slowly. "I need the truth." He nodded once. "You'll get it." His voice sounded tired, not defeated, just tired. He rubbed both hands across his face before speaking again. "I started gambling almost 18 years ago." Rebecca closed her eyes. Ethan stared at the floor. Michael continued. "It wasn't supposed to become a habit. I won the first few times. I thought I had found an easy way to make extra money." I had heard those words before. Different situation, same excuse. I kept telling myself one more trip would fix everything. He laughed bitterly. "It never did." He looked toward me. "The investment that failed." He swallowed. "It wasn't really an investment." I wasn't surprised. Still, hearing him admit it hurt. I had already lost money gambling. I needed another explanation. "So I invented the investment," Rebecca whispered. "Oh my God." Michael nodded slowly. "When Angela sold her mother's jewelry." He couldn't continue. Tears filled his eyes. "I promised myself I'd never gamble again." He looked directly at me. I meant it. For the first time in years, I believed he was telling the truth. Not because I trusted him, because regret sounded different from manipulation. He continued. "I stayed away for almost 4 years. Then I went back. Just once." He laughed quietly. "There is no such thing as just once." No one interrupted him. "I began hiding money. Then I needed more money. So I opened another account." He looked toward Patricia's name on the documents. "I never wanted Patricia involved. I only needed somewhere money wouldn't attract attention." Rebecca frowned. "So you lied to her too?" Michael nodded. "I told her I was managing temporary investments, and she believed me." He closed his eyes. "She trusted me." I quietly said, just like I did. He looked at me. "I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. After 37 years, 2 words. "I'm sorry." Too late. Far too late. Ethan spoke quietly. "Why did you make us think Mom was losing her memory?" Michael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me for a long time. Then he whispered, "Because I was afraid." Rebecca frowned. "Afraid of what?" He took a deep breath. "If Angela ever started asking questions." He looked down. "Why? People might believe her." The room became silent again. "So," he continued, "I started planting little doubts. I corrected harmless stories. I joked about her memory. I answered questions before she could. I made it seem normal." Rebecca looked horrified. "You planned all that?" Michael nodded once. "I never intended it to go this far." I finally spoke. It always goes that far. He looked at me. I continued calmly. Manipulation never stays small. It grows. Just like lies. Michael didn't argue. Because he couldn't. Everything I said matched the evidence sitting between us. Rebecca wiped away another tear. I believed you. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her father. I defended you. I questioned Mom. I asked her to see a neurologist. She covered her mouth. I did exactly what you wanted. Michael whispered, I know. She shook her head. No. You don't. You stole years from us. Those words seemed to hit him harder than anything else. Years. Not money, not gambling. Years. He looked toward me again. I stole yours too. I nodded. You did. There was no anger in my voice anymore. Only truth. Michael took another deep breath. I have something else to admit. Everyone waited. I didn't just manipulate conversations. I watched for opportunities. Rebecca looked confused. What does that mean? He answered quietly. If Angela forgot something small, I repeated it. If she made a mistake, I reminded everyone. If she stayed quiet, I explained why. He looked ashamed. I knew eventually people would stop questioning me. Ethan stared at him. You turned Mom's kindness into evidence against her. Michael closed his eyes. Yes. No one spoke. After a long silence, he looked directly at me. I always knew why you stayed quiet. Rebecca frowned. What? Michael nodded. I knew Angela was protecting me. The room froze. Rebecca looked at me, then back at him. You knew. He nodded again. Every time she stayed silent, I knew why. Tears rolled down his face. I let everyone believe she was weak. When I knew she was the strongest person in the room, I felt something inside me loosen. Not forgiveness, just relief. For years, I had wondered whether Michael understood what I had sacrificed. Now I finally knew. He had always known. He had simply chosen himself anyway. Rebecca quietly walked around the table, not toward her father, toward me. She wrapped both arms around me. I'm so sorry, Mom. I hugged her tightly. You have nothing to apologize for. I should have listened. I know. I should have trusted you. I know. She cried against my shoulder. Ethan joined us a moment later. He hugged both of us. I won't let anyone speak over you again. I smiled sadly. You don't have to. He looked confused. Why? Because I won't let them either. Across the room, Michael quietly cried alone. No one hated him. No one yelled. No one insulted him. Sometimes silence is louder than anger. He finally looked up. I'll get help. I nodded. I hope you do. I mean it. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. No, you shouldn't. He accepted that without arguing. For once, there was no excuse, no explanation, no attempt to redirect blame, just consequences. The truth had finally reached the one place Michael had spent decades protecting, his own conscience, and judging by the look on his face, it had already begun punishing him far more than I ever could. People often imagine that justice feels like victory. It doesn't. Justice is quieter than that. It arrives after the shouting has ended, after everyone has gone home, after you finally sit alone with the truth. The morning after Michael confessed, I woke before sunrise. For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of the day ahead. I simply felt tired. 40 years of carrying someone else's secrets had become very heavy. Now I was finally allowed to put them down. Michael was already sitting in the kitchen when I came downstairs. A cup of untouched coffee sat in front of him. He looked as though he hadn't slept. "I made coffee." "Thank you." I poured myself a cup and sat across from him. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, he broke the silence. "I called a gambling treatment program." I nodded. "I hope you go." "I will." Another pause. "I'll tell Patricia everything." "She deserves the truth." "I know." He looked older than I had ever seen him, not because of age, because shame changes a person's face. After another long silence, he asked, "Is there any chance?" He couldn't finish the sentence. I answered gently, "No." He closed his eyes. "I understand." For the first time in our marriage, he didn't argue with my answer. That afternoon, I met with my attorney. The divorce papers had already been prepared. Not because I had planned revenge, because I had promised myself something. If the truth ever came out, I would never return to the life that required me to disappear. Signing those papers should have broken my heart. Instead, I felt strangely peaceful. I wasn't ending a good marriage. I was ending the performance of one. When I returned home, I placed the documents on the dining room table. Michael looked at them quietly. "So this is it?" "Yes." He nodded. "I won't fight you." "I didn't think you would." He looked around the house. So many memories. I smiled sadly. The memories belong to us. The lies belong to you. He lowered his head. "I know." Within a week, Michael moved into a small apartment across town. He took only what he needed: clothes, books, a few personal belongings. He didn't ask for the house. He didn't argue about money. His attorney accepted every condition my attorney proposed. Perhaps guilt had finally replaced pride. Rebecca visited almost every evening after that. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we simply sat together drinking tea. One evening, she looked at me and quietly asked, "Mom?" "Yes. Were you really going to keep protecting Dad forever?" I thought about that for a long moment. I believed I was protecting our family. But I was wrong. How? Because protecting one person's lies eventually hurts everyone else. She nodded slowly. I never thought about it that way. Neither had I. Not for many years. Ethan came over the following weekend carrying boxes. "What are these?" He smiled. "Packing supplies." I laughed softly. "For what?" "You said you've always wanted a smaller place." "I did." "Let's find one." For the first time in years, my children weren't trying to fix me. They were helping me build something new. That difference meant everything. A few days later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Patricia. I answered immediately. "Hello?" Her voice sounded fragile. "I know everything. I'm so sorry. You don't owe me an apology. I should have asked questions." "So should I." She laughed sadly. "I suppose we both trusted the same man." "We did." After a long pause, she quietly said, "I'd still like to be your sister." Tears filled my eyes. "I'd like that too." Sometimes family isn't created by blood. Sometimes it's created by surviving the same heartbreak. A month later, I signed the final paperwork for a small cottage 15 minutes from Rebecca's home. Nothing fancy, just enough space for me. A little garden, a reading room, a porch where I could drink coffee every morning. As Ethan carried the last box inside, he looked around and smiled. "This feels like you." I looked around the empty living room. It did. For the first time in decades, every decision inside those walls belonged to me. No one answered questions for me. No one corrected my memories. No one explained my silence. Rebecca helped me unpack books. She stopped when she found one of my journals. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "Will you keep writing?" I smiled. "Yes." "But not because I need evidence anymore." "Then why?" "So I never forget how strong I really am." She hugged me tightly. "I'll never doubt you again." I believed her. Not because she promised, because trust had finally returned. It would never erase the past, but it gave us a future. Several weeks later, I saw Michael one last time before the divorce became official. We met at the attorney's office to sign the final documents. He looked healthier. He told me he had attended every counseling session. He was working part-time. He had stopped gambling. "I know that doesn't change anything." "No?" "It doesn't. I just wanted you to know." I nodded. "I hope you keep going." He smiled sadly. "You always wanted me to become a better man." I answered honestly. "I wanted you to become an honest one." He looked down. "I wish I'd done that sooner." "So do I." When we walked out of the building, we stood quietly in the parking lot. No anger, no shouting, no dramatic goodbye. Just two people whose lives had finally reached the truth. He got into his car. I got into mine. Neither of us looked back. As I drove toward my new home, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. The road ahead no longer frightened me, because for the first time, it was my own. 6 months after my divorce became final, I woke up before sunrise just as I always had. The difference was simple. Silence no longer frightened me. It comforted me. I carried a mug of coffee onto the front porch of my little cottage. The garden was beginning to bloom. Yellow daisies lined the walkway. The maple tree in the front yard had begun turning red with the first hints of autumn. For the first time in decades, every sound around me belonged to a peaceful life. No footsteps made me nervous. No voice waited to correct me. No one was preparing to explain what I really meant. I was finally alone, and I had never felt less lonely. Every Tuesday morning, I volunteered at a local community center that offered support groups for older women. Some were widows. Some had survived abusive marriages. Others simply needed someone willing to listen without interrupting. At first, I only helped organize books in the reading room. Old habits die slowly. Then one afternoon, the director asked me a question. "Angela?" "Yes." "Would you ever consider speaking to the group?" I smiled nervously. "I don't think anyone wants to hear me." She smiled back. "I think they do." The following week, I stood in front of 12 women. Some looked frightened. Some looked exhausted. Some reminded me of the woman I had been only months earlier. I took a deep breath. "My name is Angela. I spent 37 years believing peace was more important than my own voice." The room became perfectly still. No one interrupted. No one corrected me. No one explained my words for me. For the first time in my life, people simply listened. When I finished speaking, an elderly woman quietly raised her hand. "How did you find this courage?" I smiled. I didn't. She looked confused. I simply became more afraid of losing myself than speaking the truth. Several women cried. A few hugged me afterward. One whispered, "I thought I was the only one." Those words reminded me why stories matter. Because someone somewhere is always waiting to hear that they aren't alone. Rebecca and Ethan visited almost every weekend. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we played board games. Sometimes we sat on the porch doing absolutely nothing. Those ordinary afternoons became the most precious moments of my life. One Saturday, Rebecca handed me a small wrapped box. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a leather journal. Beautiful. Simple. Exactly my style. She smiled. "I thought maybe you were ready for a new one." I ran my fingers across the cover. "I've filled so many journals already." "I know." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "But this one isn't for evidence. It's for happiness." I hugged her tightly. She was right. That night, I opened the first page. Instead of writing dates, or transactions, or lies, I wrote, "Today my daughter gave me a journal that doesn't need to prove anything." That single sentence meant more to me than hundreds of pages of painful memories. A few weeks later, Patricia came to visit. She brought homemade apple pie. We spent hours talking on the porch. She told me Michael had continued attending counseling. He had remained away from gambling. He had started speaking honestly with the rest of the family. I listened quietly. She finally asked, "Do you hate him?" I looked out toward the garden. "No." "Do you forgive him?" I thought for a long moment. "I hope he finds peace." "But forgiveness doesn't always mean returning." She nodded slowly. "I understand." And I realized something. For years, I had confused forgiveness with obligation. They are not the same. You can forgive someone and still choose a different future. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan helped me hang a bird feeder outside the kitchen window. As we watched two cardinals land together, he smiled. "You laugh more now." I hadn't noticed. "Do I?" "A lot more." I laughed again. "I suppose I do." He looked thoughtful. "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "You never really lost your voice." I looked at him. "You only stopped letting other people hear it." His words stayed with me long after he left. He was right. My voice had never disappeared. It had simply been buried beneath years of fear, guilt, and misplaced loyalty. Finding it again hadn't made me into someone new. It had brought me back to the woman I had always been. Sometimes people ask whether silence is a weakness. I don't believe it is. Silence can be wisdom. Silence can be kindness. Silence can even be love. But silence becomes dangerous the moment someone else starts writing your story for you. That is the lesson my life taught me. If your silence protects another person's lies, it no longer protects your peace. If your silence costs you your dignity, it has become too expensive. I spent 37 years believing keeping the peace was my responsibility. Now I know something much more important. Peace built on lies is never peace at all. It's only waiting for the truth to arrive. As I sit here today watching the evening sun disappear behind the trees outside my little cottage, I no longer think about the woman who spent decades apologizing for things she never did. I think about the woman who finally stood up. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth. Michael once told everyone that my silence proved I was guilty. In the end, my voice proved exactly who was. And the day I finally spoke was the day I finally became free. If there's one lesson my journey has taught me, it's this: silence and peace are not always the same thing. Sometimes we stay quiet because we love someone. Sometimes we stay quiet because we hope tomorrow will be better. And sometimes we stay quiet because we've been made to believe our voice no longer matters. But the truth has a remarkable way of surviving. You don't have to scream to be strong. You don't have to seek revenge to find justice. And you don't have to hate someone to finally walk away from the life that keeps hurting you. For years, I believed protecting someone else meant sacrificing pieces of myself. I know now that real love should never require you to disappear. If someone constantly speaks for you, questions your memories, or makes you doubt your own worth, please remember this: your voice deserves to be heard, even if it shakes. Your story belongs to you, not to the person trying to rewrite it. No matter your age, it is never too late to choose honesty over fear, peace over pretending, and yourself over the version of you that someone else created. Thank you for spending your time with me and listening to my story. It means more than you know. Before you go, I'd truly love to hear from you. Have you ever stayed silent to protect someone you loved? Looking back, would you make the same choice again? Please share your thoughts in the comments, because your story might give someone else the courage they need today. And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and meeting people from all around the world. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories of hope, resilience, and second chances waiting for you here. Until next time, take care of yourself and never let anyone convince you that your voice doesn't matter.